much. So Mike, maybe coming to you first, do you want to just introduce yourself and tell us who you are?
Yeah, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's not too late. It's not too early anymore. It's about 9 a.m. here, but the sun's peeking out. I'm in Northern California today. I'm taking actually part of a road trip down the coast to see some family. But so yeah, I've spent my life in human space flight. Started out at NASA working on the space shuttle, and then worked many years on the space station in many different roles. And the last role I had was doing risk management, and that opened doors to SpaceX as they started getting more and more government contracts with the Air Force and NASA. And then I've done a lot of consulting, and then worked for Blue Origin. Actually had a year as a vice president working for Jeff Bezos in Seattle. That took me up to the Pacific Northwest, if you're familiar with that region of America. Beautiful, lush green area with mountains and snow everywhere. And then now I've decided to go back to consulting and sort of semi-retire, and I do a lot of writing, speaking, and working with a startup that we're going to see where that goes. So just dabbling in many things. But yeah, good to be here. Really impressive panels. One thing I talk a lot about climate change, unrelated to probably today's discussion, and some of the stuff Mike talked about. I was actually going to hit on a little bit today, but I didn't have any formal or prepared remarks. I think we were going to do a back and forth with Sarah, and then open it up and make it more like relevant to what you guys need to hear and what's relevant to your businesses and what things you guys are curious about.
Yeah, no, definitely. So to that, everybody, if you've got questions for Mike, please do put them into chat or into the Q&A, and I shall weave them into our discussion. Now, Mike, the first main question for you, well, actually, no, the first question is, this has got nothing to do necessarily with technology and digital innovation, by the way. What is it like being a risk manager for the world's biggest billionaires?
Yeah, it could be stressful at times, but it's not. I think when I always say, even with the NASA jobs, as risk professionals, if you're a risk practitioner, you're really the facilitator. You're the guy trying to move information from point A to point B. I always like to describe risk management as a communication system, and so it's so important to get the right information to the decision makers so they can make good decisions. And that's really our job. And as we talk, and we'll get into how modern technology is sort of helping us do that. That's the key. In my job, all these jobs that you have financial industries and other things, we are so inundated with this new information age we're in, where we're just bombarded by all sides, up, top, bottom, right, left. What's our competitors doing? People watch competitors a lot more than, or they don't watch them more than they used to. They have a lot more detailed information than they used to. So how do you take this barrage of information we get every day and then figure out how to make a decision? Should we do this product? Every time an aerospace company tries to develop a rocket or a spacecraft, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's like you're risking the company every time you make a decision to do these things. And how can you make a good decision? And then obviously when you're operating and developing this, there's just infinite number of risks that you come across. So it's all about trying to prioritize and qualitatively, and we use quantitative techniques too. And what's really important, where should you be spending your time and your resources? Where the decisions need to be made, and where other things need to be sort of researched more and wait for more data to come in and those kind of things.
Brilliant. So with that then, Mike, I mean, over your career to date, what kind of technological innovations have you seen that have really kind of come to pass that have significantly changed how you manage risk?
Yeah, I thought about that a lot, preparing for this. And, as I was at NASA, we really didn't get into risk management until the late 90s, early 2000s. And we had simple tools and they weren't really connected. And what I've seen, back to Mike's point, you end up doing a lot of software development stuff you never thought you'd ever get into. When we do a lot of these make buy decisions, and the buy decisions of the stuff that's commercially available is getting better and better and closer, but it's always like a 80% solution or a 70% solution. So everywhere I've been, we've done the internal make stuff using SQL databases and different types of interfaces depending on what environments we're in. But the biggest thing that's really powerful is just connecting everything together. So connecting the actual schedule data into your risk, connecting the actual cost data into your risk, and actually, especially at a place like SpaceX, where everything's vertically integrated, we have very few suppliers, and so all your production system, where essentially is working in a rocket factory, and to be able to reference the part numbers, the drawings, the even you can obviously attach just random things, but what was really powerful, the way we linked all the data together, and we kept, over the years I was there 6 years, every year I kept creating this, I hate to use all these acronyms, but this what's the word, enterprise management systems, EMS we call that, or no, IMS, information management systems, but it's pretty much enterprise wide. I'm sure there's another E in there somewhere, but to be able to connect all this stuff with production, operations, what launch are we doing? And then SpaceX got complicated because we'd be relaunching rockets. Finally, the world's reusing rockets now. Being able to connect things like, oh, this is the third flight on this rocket. This risk has been there each time and hasn't been realized. That could be luck. It could be because we're mitigating it, whatever. But you just have so much more power to connect all the little dots, and that's what makes all these little tiny details are what make the difference between a rocket blowing up and getting to space and a huge accident, because everything is just so sensitive to the smallest perturbation. So I think that's the biggest thing I've seen is the decades have gone on is just connecting everything to everything, not for the sake of because it makes you feel good, but because you can actually communicate more detailed, pertinent information to the decision makers, to like, why is this okay to fly with this risk open, or why do we have to scrub the launch and hold the launch till we get this issue addressed.
And with that, Mike, I mean, obviously, scrubbing a launch or what have you, I mean, that's a big decision. There's huge money involved, and also, I guess, emotion, etc., involved as well. Is that something where is that a risk-based decision, or is it something like from yourself, or is it something where the engineering team are the ones who bring it to the table? Who actually drives that decision making?
It's different every place I've worked, but essentially you have it's a group effort, and everybody's sort of bubbling up their information, their top risks, and then it's somebody's job at the pointy, at the end, and because sometimes that could be the CEO, or it could be Elon Musk himself, and many times because he's early on in the company very involved in the operations. Now, as we became, launched over 100 rockets now, he's obviously stepping back and doing more strategic and technical work of where the company's going to be going. But and that's a whole conversation too. You want to make sure you've got the right decision makers making the decisions, and not just somebody coming in to make a decision that's based on political considerations or public perception. And that's what was one of the causes back in '86. If anybody was still around or remember as a kid, the Challenger accident. The Ronald Reagan the president at the time had a State of the Union that night, and we wanted to have this teacher, Christy McAuliffe, in space. And you got to make sure you got the right decision makers using the right criteria. So there's not a one size fits all to that answer, Sarah, but you've got to make sure for operational risk, you get the operational experts involved, and then for if it's a development risk, financial risk, schedule risk, you got to have the right people with the right authority making those decisions. So if you're succeeding, you're pushing down some decision making, but obviously there's always these big, $1 million, $10 million, $100 million decisions where they typically go to the very top, and they status, the CEO and the president, or maybe the founder in these cases.
Yeah. And I mean, with that, Mike, we spent quite a lot of time this morning in the earlier session that we ran talking about how, was it machines versus humans, or actually are we talking, instead of like artificial intelligence, it's augmented intelligence and human beings with that co-pilot, which is where all of the AI, the data, etc., comes in. How do you feel about that? Because it sounds like with regards to these big decisions, it's still a human being that's making them. But
and I think there always should be. Even in my industry, we haven't really gone down that road of the AI stuff. What I think is making the big innovation is just be able to help make sense of this data and use the data more effectively. So we have something we call in communication signal to noise ratio on a radio or an antenna, but it's also the back to my point about too much data. So you want that signal, you want the information that's coming across that beam of energy. You don't just want all the white fuzz and the white noise in the background and, oh my gosh, it's raining today and it's humid or whatever, geez, we got to talk about this HR problem immediately. It's like, no, we're in the middle of a rocket countdown. So it's that signal to noise ratio. So I think that's where AI really, shouldn't say AI, the information technology is really helping us, tie things together and take data, the term we all use, it's probably global, take data and turn it into information. And that's that signal to noise thing. So there may be some simple rules, like you have launch commit criteria, like it has to be a certain winds and weather and it can't be lightning. And there's certain things you can delegate to computers and AI, but at the end of the day, these are tough decisions where you have to mix in, like I said, political with cost, with schedule, with technical, and before you make a lot of these decisions. So I don't think we would ever want to delegate that to an AI algorithm, no matter how good they get in 100 years, because at the end of the day, I think humans are just uniquely qualified to, and you'd be giving your authority away to. I mean, why? What would be the point in having a company or doing anything if you thought you could delegate your whole thing to a computer? Then humans wouldn't be needed, and whatever. So there's certain roles that you can take that, but otherwise it's like, then nobody goes to work and we all just sit around and eat bonbons or something. I don't know. We have to do work as humans. We have to do meaningful work and be involved in that. And certainly certain processing of information and leveraging technology is so important to do that. But at the end of the day, I think we're here to be humans, not to put everything off to somewhere else.
So talking about, I guess being humans, and of course being humans, we're a pretty curious species, I guess, which is perhaps one of the causes for actually taking that chance of sitting on top of a big rocket and blasting off our planet to go and take a look at what's out there. I guess some of the biggest technological innovations, be it on the robotics side or what have you, has been coming from the space sector over the last however many decades. So stepping away perhaps from that data collection, have you seen innovation happen in that more kind of physical engineering sense that has allowed us to either eliminate or significantly change the status of certain risks, or also, of course, create new risks as well?
Well, it's both. Yeah, so one of the more exciting things you hear a lot about in the media is 3D printing, and we're printing Inconel, which is a nickel alloy. Very, very strong. I've used a lot in aerospace, and you can print titanium and other kind of exotic metals. And so these are being used more and more. So you're able to do so much more for so cheaper. That's why you're seeing all these new countries around the world form space agencies and put satellites up. And the barrier to entry into aerospace is not some magical thing that only 5 countries can do, or 5 companies in America could do, like what started out when I started my career something years ago. Those barriers to entry and the cost of developing a rocket and stuff have gone way down. Now, it's not cheap, it's not super accessible because of the physics involved of trying to get up to 28,000 kilometers per hour to get into orbit. But the barriers, I mean, look at what North Korea is doing. They're in the news every week, or twice a week, I think this week, doing some new, unfortunately, weapons, not things that will help humanity progress more, death and killing and whatever, but that's what we are as humans. But yeah, that you get to see what's going on, the barriers to entry, the cost, the development, the things that only a few people could do before now can be printed. You can have, with printing, you can have all these hollow, cavities and cooling circuits and things. It's amazing what's going on. So that's one example. I think, to answer your question of how technology it's just 3D printing is just a game changer. You can do things faster, cheaper, try it out, print it, see what happens. Oh, it didn't work, it blew up. Okay, let's try another piece, and it's pieces of, these are components you're printing, right? So there are companies though printing the whole rocket, which is crazy. Small rockets, not huge rockets, because printers are limited by size, but it's Relativity out of Los Angeles, El Segundo, actually right next to SpaceX. All these companies these startups are a lot of ex-SpaceX people, because they realize, wow, you can actually do this stuff, and they get so much expertise. But yeah, 3D printing is one of those things where, it's just changing everything, and also creating new risks, because people don't know for, literally millennium, metals have been around, copper, we talk about the Bronze Era and the Copper Era and all this stuff. And so we know how those metals fatigue, and how they, how stress fractures happen, and how crack growth happens, and all these complicated metallurgical things. But printing, nobody knows, like, well, how long is this piece going to last? How many hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands can we fatigue it before it breaks? And that when you do casting or forging, these common techniques, but printing, people are like, I don't know. So anyways, that's the new risk that these introduce. They solve huge schedule and cost risks, but then they create, like, well, how safe is this piece, and how does it fatigue, and when does it fail?
That's awesome. And that actually takes us all the way back to the first talk that we had earlier on today, from Gregory. And he talked about, well, some of the problem that we have with a lot of the, using artificial intelligence, et cetera, is it's all, and the historic data sets aren't necessarily all that good, or perhaps even relevant. So as you say, for something like casting, we've got masses of information and knowledge with regards to that. But, new technologies such as 3D printing, there's loads of question marks. So with that, Mike, I've got one last question for you that comes in from Richard, and he's asking you, I think this came in after you said that you'd been in the industry for 30 years. So take that as a compliment rather than anything else. And he says, what bit of risk management advice would you give yourself starting out, given what you know now?
Oh boy. It's one of those things I always talk about when I'm lecturing on risk management, is just keep it simple. Like, risk management is just a communication system. Like, I was at one company, and it was this PhD went there and tried to, he formed his own logarithmic function to make all risks, like, instead of multiplying likelihood by, it's just qualitative, mind you, but he's trying to make qualitative risk management into quantitative. So he made this algorithm to make, like, if it's 1 or less than 1, it's green. If it's 1 to 2, it's yellow. And it had this weird, the shape of these risk matrix. It was a 5x5 we used a lot, to have this risk value that it would also tell you the color, and it just didn't, I just kept laughing at it. It's so impressive he was able to do this and somehow back it out of a pre-made yellow, green, red, 25 squares, and back out a algorithm to do this. But it was sort of useless, and sort of distracted people from, this simple communication system of, you want to get information to the boss so he can adjudicate it and say, yes, we're going to accept it, move ahead, don't close it, just put it in the accepted pile, and then, or no, we're going to mitigate this and spend some money and resource and time and throw people at this thing. So yeah, just keeping it simple. All these people, everybody on this telecom, our industries are so complex. There's nothing simple about healthcare and finance and climate change. Keep the risk stuff the simple. Leverage these new technologies to get better information and connect the information, but don't make the process of the system complicated. Our lives are just full of complication. Just keep the risk stuff as simple as you can.
Awesome. So I think with that, that resounding, keep it simple, ringing in our ears. Mike, thank you so much for joining us from California. Absolutely brilliant to see you as ever. So if everybody wants to put their hands together, say a big thank you for Mike. Thanks very much, Mike. That's brilliant. Cool.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
So with that,